Hello, welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I wonder if Henry Winkler winked at me, would he be a winking Winkler?
And I'm Gary, and today we're going to review and discuss Here Comes the Boom, which came out in 2012. Written by Alan Loeb and Kevin James, and directed by Frank Coraci. Iain, why don't you give us the synopsis?
Well, the story follows Scott Voss, played by Kevin James, who is a teacher. His friend Henry Winkler is about to lose his job, and so Scott decides to join MMA and fight underground cage fighting for the money to save his friend's job. Will Scott be able to go all the way, or will he tap out?
Hey man, great fight. I'm so sorry.
Now, I didn't realise this going into this film in particular, and I should have been very, very bloody aware that this film almost breaches my rule of reviewing Adam Sandler movies. And this one kind of got through the cracks, because it was only like 2 minutes into this film I was like, no, my Sandler's tingling senses were off the chart. I was like, quickly, I need to look up. Yes. Adam Sandler is an executive producer of this film, and it's no real surprise, really, when we go back and look at where Kevin James has come from. Now, you know a bit more about Kevin James before. Like, my introduction to Kevin James came with Paul Blart Mall Cop, Zookeeper.
Grown Ups, these other Kevin James kind of
disasters,
mix and match character that we just know, like you said, is funded by the Sandler Corporation.
Exactly. To me, Kevin James was just another Adam Sandler crony.
But he's not. Like, I looked into it and I found out, he did a lot of stand-up comedy. I'm not a Kevin James fan per se, but I will go on a limb at the beginning of this review and say, this is not the worst film ever. It's not the best film ever, no, but it's not the worst. And with somebody like Kevin James, you can immediately think to yourself, oh my God, it's Paul Blart. It's the guy from the King of Queens TV show. And yeah, he's not funny.
Well, I've personally never found him funny, nor have I ever seen him as a credible actor.
No.
It wasn't until really last year. Now, I mean, critics and the reception for the film wasn't overwhelmingly positive anyway.
Yeah.
But there was a horror film that came out called Becky too long ago, and Kevin James was the lead villain in that film.
Yeah.
And I was just like, he's actually okay. He was actually pretty decent as an actor in this movie.
Right, exactly.
So when this film came around, I was just like, there's one Kevin James film that's all right.
Well,
let's give this one a go.
The best one we all know is Paul Blart Mall Cop. I mean, come on, it's Paul Blart. But Here Comes the Boom, I've seen it twice, and this is the second time, and I did kind of force Gary to do this one just to get out of the way, rip the Band-Aid off, just get the Kevin James movie done. And I knew what we were going in for. It's boring and tedious, and the jokes are painted on, paint by numbers. Like, we start with him waking up at 7:45 in his room. Like, does he live with his parents? Does he live on his own? The film never actually establishes this, because he immediately realizes he's late. He jumps on his bike and he bombs his way to work. And immediately I don't like his character.
Yeah, he's a bit of a slob, and
Yeah, but he's not. He's a bit of a because he's got a bike.
Yeah,
he's high school wrestling champ, however long that was ago, and
I honestly found the first 5 minutes of the film to be fairly lighthearted, fairly humorous. It was the whole routine. It's the montage of him setting up this character like he's always late for work, or actually no, we find out that he's rarely late for work. It's only more recently that he's becoming late for work.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of humour where, you can't get in the front gates, we've got to go around the back and drive over the lawn and climb up the fence and the wall to get into the classroom window. And
I mean, they couldn't afford that guy to play the principal, but they got that guy that we know, Greg German,
bygones.
He's your atypical principal who obviously doesn't like the fact that Kevin James's character is the slacker teacher know-it-all. Like, he climbs through the window in front of the whole class and pretends it's a giraffe giving birth.
And that is how a baby antelope comes into the world. The window, obviously, would be...
The window would be the birth canal. Whereas the whole building, that's your mother right there.
You're late.
Yeah.
That's the level of comedy that we're at here, people. Not 10 minutes into the movie. And I do feel a bit bad for Kevin James that this is where he had to work. But he gives it his all, and he tries to play off against other actors in the movie. Salma Hayek.
Well, I mean, he's extensively flirting with her, but...
Yeah.
You know, like... I mean, you know what the, like... After 30 seconds of this movie, you know what this movie is. You can already write. It's already written itself at this point.
Sandler's just waving it in your face like, here you go. I was going to star in it, but I didn't.
It's the same formula over and over again, and so you know, despite the fact that these two don't maybe belong together, it's where they're going to end up at the end of the movie.
Did she do Grown Ups before this? I didn't actually check it, because she was Sandler's wife in that one.
Exactly. I mean, I guess Adam Sandler was like, okay, so we'll just pass Selma Hayek on to Kevin James now.
You said you were going to do a couple more movies. Here's another paycheck. Like, she's the school nurse.
Yeah.
The film rarely establishes that. It mainly establishes that, you know, we've got this music group as well. And you've got Henry Winkler, who...
Oh, he's a legend.
Yeah, I was going to say, the one saving grace with a lot of these movies is it gives somebody like Henry Winkler another platform to perform. And I think he does outshine everybody in this movie. He does.
He really does.
You know, he's that...
He's the heart and soul of the film as well. He's the one who really cares. He's the teacher who really bonds with the students and loves this music. And you get that moment when he's at home and Kevin James talking to his wife, and he sees that he's got all these broken instruments that he's buying and repairing for his students, you know.
But his wife's pregnant.
Yeah, and I found this joke funny, but of course it's offensive. But it's I was like, this is probably the only offensive and funny joke in the entire film.
Yeah, they're laughing about obviously Henry Winkler's age, and then there's this whole staff meeting, and you have, like I said, Greg German standing there at the front of the staff talking about how the school's going through budget problems, and that they're going to have to start making some cuts, and one of those cuts is the music lessons, which are Henry Winkler's lessons. Now, I'm going to bring it up now because the film doesn't really establish it until about, an hour and a half into the movie. You have Mookie Baker playing the vice principal, Elkins. Now, he's a pinnacle character in this movie, but the movie doesn't establish that. Well, until towards the end.
He has like 2 scenes until the end. Yeah. He has the scene where he's just like, it's tough, it's horrible, budget cuts, I know. And there's a scene later where when Kevin James decided he's going to try and find a reason or a way to keep the music lessons going and save the school.
Yeah.
The principal is just like, I remember back in the day when I was in the French marching band, I used to play the French horn. And so I appreciate what you're trying to do to save this music class.
But that's it. He doesn't really do anything. But he will. And Kevin James is also working like night classes. And in one of his classes, he's got Nico, played by Bas Rutten, who's one of the students in the night class. And he wants to... Well, they're all wanting to become American citizens. So there's some kind of offensive, racist jokes there, obviously foreigners wanting to become Americans. And Nico wants to get more lessons from Kevin James, and Kevin James realizes this is a way to get more money, to be able to pay for Henry Winkler to stay on. And as soon as he turns up there, it's just 3 guys in a dark room drinking beer, watching UFC. And I'm like, awkward. Like... You'd happily just walk in there now and they just sit you down and give you a beer and you just start watching the UFC, and they watch a couple of guys, take themselves down, and Kevin James is like, oh yeah, I can make money through this.
Well, it was the fact that he finds out that the loser of this match got paid $10,000 for losing. So he was like, well, if I lose like 5 matches, I can pay back and save the school.
It's completely stupid. It makes no sense. But I do like the way, like, I knew what this, when I paid my ticket at the beginning of this movie, I knew what I was walking into.
It's the
and
joke.
Winkler and James going back and forth, talking about losing, and how it's all about just the setup and how easy. And so he convinces Nico to help him.
Yeah, I mean, Nico at first is just like, no, like, look at you. There's not a chance in hell you can fight.
Ding, ding, boom, boom. Elbow, elbow, boom. Liver shot, bang, bang, bang. Oh, knockout blow. You get the point.
And, I mean, but that is the whole joke. That is the whole concept behind this film, is that you take this, this overweight, out of shape, schlubby teacher who could not ever possibly compete with these juggernauts, these titans, these Goliaths, these
UFC.
perfect specimens of fighting human machines. Kevin James in the arena. That's the joke.
But don't forget, he's a high school wrestling champion, so all he has to do is take him down to the ground.
Okay, so I'm like, okay, I can believe that, right? That gives him an in.
Yeah.
It's the fact then that, the whole thing around this film is like, Kevin James, 14 months, he knew he was going to be in this film, so he got himself into shape. I'm like, what?
Kind of, it's shape, tonal mass.
But it's the joke that he's out of shape in doing it, but then he gets himself into shape to do it, which defeats the joke.
When we get the montages, that it goes completely out the window for me. Because this first fight, he gets up and, Winkler's just like, yeah, it's all about intimidation. You've got to get in the mind. You've got to, break the person. And so that's where we get Here Comes the Boom. The title of the movie, played by POD, the Christian rock band, and it's funny. I mean, is that the joke? That's the joke, isn't it? Having the title of the movie is playing the song, and we're watching Kevin James bounce towards the ring with Winkler like, woo yeah, woo yeah,
barely holding on to his helmet.
Oh god, the helmet! I forgot about the helmet. You just brought the helmet back. That's nightmare material that is. And he climbs into the ring with this helmet. There was a lot of UFC fighters who put themselves into the roles of this movie, and I think this cage fighter is one of them. And he just knees Kevin James right in the head.
First one move done.
that is funny. The movie does hit the notes of delivering the jokes and and the material that it's trying to develop. The material itself is very stale and not very used very well, developed very well, but they do manage to hit the nail on the head. But it's like they wheel him off and you're like, oh yeah, he got taken out. And then he's sitting there with Salma Hayek and she's like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I just got kneed in the head. I'm like, man, that's like 6 weeks of concussions.
Right.
That's like, no, you're not fighting again. He's like, yeah, I got another fight tomorrow. That's where the movie starts to lose its heart.
A little bit, but then you get this next sequence. What I do like is when there's the three of them in the car driving to the next fight.
Yes.
And they're talking about how Henry Winkler keeps forgetting to bring the stool so that he's got nowhere to sit during the fight.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, I also forgot to bring your lunch because I made sure I've got the stool this time. Oh, here there's some applesauce.
Oh, God.
Here, eat this applesauce ready for your fight. So he eats the applesauce and he gets ready for the fight. And he actually manages to,
Well, he wins the fight because the guy he's fighting, it's kind of a cross between, I think, Conor McGregor or just a joke on that kind of UFC over-the-top character. He has Here Comes the Boom as his intro song.
Yes, yeah.
And so, obviously, Winkler and Voss, they have no idea what to do now, so they play Neil Diamond.
Yeah! All right, it's Scott! Hey, Scott! Oh, he's in the house! Scott Boss! Hey!
You'd never I mean, I find that funny.
That's funny.
It's funny.
That's what I mean. It's got some things. It's funny, And the guy in the ring, he's looking at Voss. He's like, "I'm just gonna knock you out. You're a fucking joke." And Voss manages to get him with a hit.
Yeah.
Which surprises everybody. And then when Kevin James is walking, like you could have just ended it there, movie, and the movie would have been fine. But the fact he walks over to shake the guy's hand on the floor and then he vomits all over him. You're like, what? Really? But then it does, it gets played back when they're driving back and the three of them are kind of all quiet and, Voss explains about who leaves applesauce in the window of his car, and Winkler's really sorry, but Nico's like, hey, but we won, and everybody's really happy that they won, and I was very surprised that the movie starts to take this turn, that he starts to win so early, like through extra training as well. Like Nico sets him up with a striker, Mark Munoz, who plays Romero, and they start to teach Voss how to hit, because he can take a punch and he can keep going for ages, but he just can't hit back. He hasn't got the coordination, which on top of that, he's then balancing his teaching of the children, because he's trying to teach them really well.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, this film, it literally is Kevin James' fantasy reality, where at the start of the film, he's a piece of shit who can't teach his class, hold down his job, get a girlfriend, fucking do wrestling. He can't do anything, and yet by the end of the film, he is a champion UFC fighter. He's got the hottest girl in the school. He saved the school. You know, they built a statue of him outside. You know, it's just like
sparklers, like,
like Kevin James is for president. You know, it's that's the kind of world that this is. But like, I also, I mean, I might sound like I'm having a go at the film, but that's kind of the way all these comedy films are, though.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy who did The Waterboy. This is the guy who directed Wedding Singer. This guy has worked with Adam Sandler, who was working in the background and working with Kevin James. And they're like, look, we need to make a movie. What can we do? I get what you're meaning. Like, I hate the fact that all the realism is taken out of this movie. But I've seen films like Warrior with Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
You know, and I you know, I've seen like these other gritty, realistic fighting movies that make and it's really heart pulling on the strings. Every now and again, I need a laugh, and that's what this movie does. But like I said, what caught me off guard was there's this whole montage section in the movie where Voss, Winkler and Nico are all working together along with Romero to strike better and do better, and they start winning. But there's one match he actually loses to an armbar takedown, I think it is. And you're like really surprised, but that will pay off later, I suppose. They start to talk to Joe Rogan, which at first I really didn't recognize because he's got hair.
Right.
And then that really confused me because I was just like, hold on, I thought, Dana White was bold, and Dana White obviously is involved with UFC as well. And then I looked up Dana White and Joe Rogan at the same time, and it's spooky, man. It's really I don't want to go in, I don't want to go back there.
I should probably say I don't really know anything about UFC, but I know who Joe Rogan is.
Yeah, and he sees Voss, and he sends an invitation to get him to Las Vegas to take part in this, I don't know, exhibition against this Dietrich character, and Nico turns it down. Which I'm like, oh, there's going to be some kind of hostility here now, like, because we haven't had like an actual villain. Everything's been going well, and Voss goes and speaks to Nico and says to him like, why'd you turn it down? And Nico's all upset because, hey, I trained all my life to go to fucking UFC, and you do it for like 3 weeks, and
Nico's like, if I were to fight you right now, I'd kick your ass, straight away. It was like, so how come you get the shot and I don't? And
because it's a Kevin James movie.
Exactly.
That's it. It's a Kevin James movie. Kevin James is going to get everything.
No, we find out that Nico sustained a neck injury when he was in the fighting championship, and because of that injury in training, couldn't actually fight anymore. Now, that's kind of the actor playing Nico, that's kind of like his real life story too.
Yeah.
Because he was MMA fighter, UFC fighter.
Oh, UFC Hall of Famer, yeah.
Sustained serious leg injuries, I think.
Yeah,
which
man.
again stopped him from actually competing. So that's why he's kind of here in this kind of role. But he's also been in other Kevin James work and continues to appear in Kevin James work. So
he plays the character well, but this whole hostility thing is kind of squashed within like 2 seconds.
That scene, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's done. We're all friends again. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And it plays out that as they're getting ready to take, Voss to Las Vegas to take part in this exhibition, if he loses it, he gets the 10 grand and all the money that he's been saved. Like, this is another thing about this movie that's so unrealistic, that all the money that they get from winning these fights, they literally just walk up to the vice principal and go, hey, here, put this into the kitty. And he's like, okay, I will. And it's like, well, that's not how that works. I'm sure you have to pay taxes on it. You have to declare it. There's things in the forms you have to sign. I don't know, but it turns out that the vice principal has been embezzling the money for years, and he's taken all the money from the fighting, and he's lost it.
He took it, Scott. All the money that you raised for the music program? It's gone.
So even if Voss loses the fight, he only gets 10 grand. But he's gonna win it!
Of course he is! Think of the kids!
Think of the kids! And they're there as well! They've actually gotten better at their music lessons.
Joe Rogan's flown Salma Hayek and the whole classroom out.
Yeah, because she called him. He's like, oh, how'd you get here? She's like, well, I called Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan's like... Yeah, you know, and the girl, I think it's Melina.
Yeah.
You know, the Asian actress, like she's a kind of famous singer. I didn't really wiki her for much, but you know, she had this whole storyline going as well, where she wanted to study and do well, but the class didn't, you know, and she's the
Her
reason...
dad didn't because of the restaurant.
Well, yeah, and she was going to have to go back to, you know, obviously work at the restaurant, but then Voss speaks to the dad and inspires the dad to do more.
Exactly. Kevin James fixed everything up so that he gets to go to the restaurant and they're all happy family days.
And they have this final fight against Dietrich, you know, the executioner, the hangman. He looks and just appears mean. He's probably a really nice guy.
Probably,
yeah. Like, just great with kids and stuff like that. But this guy has trained to beat the shit out of people, and he's not happy. He's got to fight this fucking
Well, he doesn't
high
even
school
respect him, does he, with the whole glove, you know, touch gloves before the fight. He's just like, no.
And I'll admit, I was kind of behind the movie at this point. I just... You know, people say, oh, I just turn my brain off with movies, and I hate doing that because I analyze and take them apart and look at it. But I'd done that at the beginning of this movie. I'd made my notes, I'd looked up as much as I could research, and then I'd just hit play and said, take me on this ride, Kevin James. And he had taken me on this ride. The first round, he gets his head kicked in.
Yeah, it's literally like 3 minutes of watching Kevin James get thrown around. And I was like, yes!
You know, it's what you're there for, you know. And then the second round, like much like the movie, he starts to come back. He starts to defend himself a little bit more. He does get a couple of hits in on Dietrich and you know, starts to wear him down. And the third round is literally just a case of he's going to lose. He's got him set up in the armbar just like he lost during the montage sequence. Yeah. But I knew it. I mean, he's a fucking ex-school pro wrestler. The best way to get out of that maneuver is to pick the motherfucker up and powerbomb his ass. And the film does aim it quite well, where you see from Dietrich's perspective, like, oh fuck, like this is gonna hurt, and he gets lifted up and everybody's shocked, and the movie gets to the crescendo and he drops him, boom, and knocks him out and wins. And Kevin James wins everything.
Everything. They build the statue of him outside the school. Well, they don't really, but I mean, you know, like, they will.
I wish I'd been in the movie.
Yeah.
I should have been in the movie. Like,
and they need the Kevin James Rocky statue outside the school.
Henry Winkler with a baby there with Winkler hair.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, Iain, what were your favourite scenes from the movie?
Oh, man, it's kind of scary, but I did have a couple. I mean, beating up Henry Winkler, you know, when he's got him wrapped around in the little mattress and he's kicking him. And it's just like, oh, how are we going to defeat this guy? We've got to get inside his mind. And then Henry Winkler screaming, intimidation!
Watch this. Intimidation!
It's just brilliant, and that joke will play off a couple of times. You know, you've got the music situation with the helmet and then running down to the ring and then playing Neil Diamond and then it playing off again with Neil Diamond at the end of the movie when the kids are all there. So it's nice and heartwarming. The fight sequences, like he has quite a few different fight sequences, which I've got to give it to Kevin James. He did put the time in. They're not really CGI. It's not like it's his head on somebody else's body. He had to properly go up against these guys to make it look realistic. It's not fucking up there with like the Dragon, you know, but it's alright. And there's that fight sequence where it starts raining, you know. And then he's like, oh, we're stopping now because it's raining. And Nico's like, man, we don't stop because it's raining. You know, you just got to keep going. And he does that a couple of times. I like I said, I was very surprised. The tap out midway through the montage should then play off to the power bomb towards the end.
Yeah.
I love a good power bomb. And like any scene with Salma Hayek in.
Of course.
Like her, I hated all the sequences with her and Kevin James is kind of always trying to kiss her and get with her, and she's just moving away. I'm like, man, this is just so wrong. Just leave it alone. But there was that sequence where he's like, he'd been striking, learned how to strike and taking on 3 guys in the ring, and his shoulder was dislocated, and so Salma Hayek is just like climbing all over this chair trying to get into a good position to pop his shoulder. And then she does, and then she's like, good night, and she walks off.
Yeah.
I'm like, is she just going to let him go? Oh, okay. That's how awesome Salma Hayek is.
I don't have any favourite scenes in the film. Like, normally, like, memorable scenes or favourite scenes have to be scenes that I'll remember long after the film is ended.
You're not, no.
It's already been 2 days since I've seen the film, and it's all disappearing. It's all disappearing into a haze that will soon be entirely forgotten, like it never even existed in the first place.
But it will go into that slot in your brain of scene.
The scene I will remember when anyone goes, hey Gary, have you ever seen Here Comes the Boom? Yeah. This is what we'll picture in my brain, and you'll see the footage now. It's Kevin James putting the trampoline down, grabbing the basketball, jumping for it, and boom, right on the floor.
Yep.
That is this film.
Yep.
For me. Now, your mileage on this film may vary. You may enjoy it all the way up to the final on-bar power drop down into the ground and the statue outside of the school. Yeah, that might be this film for you. But yeah, no favourite scenes from me, I'm afraid. Iain, do you recommend Here Comes the Boom?
I can't really bring myself to recommend Here Comes the Boom with Kevin James, simply on the fact of it's just so boring and monotonous, and the jokes, like, I did have a good time with it, and I was saying this to Gary before we started recording that, you know, it's the thing about doing film reviews is that a film is always uniquely entertaining to one person out there. Somebody out there will go, oh man, I really like that movie, and they have reasons why. And then it's the same thing for not liking that movie. Here Comes the Boom's jokes just... I've seen them done better in other movies. I've seen the performances done better in other movies. I've seen the story played off better. Kevin James is not the worst thing in the movie. Henry Winkler is the best. But I much prefer him in The Waterboy. No, Gary, no, Gary.
No, I honestly cannot personally recommend this film. This film is some old bullshit. It really, really is. I'm not a Kevin James fan, and so I really can't recommend this movie to anyone ever. But this is exactly what you need if you're looking for a kind of a silly, light-hearted, feel-good underdog story with all the tropes and all the cliches that this genre regularly has to offer.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a comedy film, so not all the jokes will work for everyone. And after the first act, the comedy for me really felt toned down in favour of trying to tell a story, which just went into fantasy land anyway. I did not find it laugh out loud funny, but the characters, some of them were enduring, and the bonds between the characters were heartwarming. I mean, that's the film's intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, the whole concept is daft, and it's not reality, it's Kevin James' world, where he becomes an expert at everything. You know, it jumps all the sharks. It's silly, it's longer than it needed to be.
Yeah.
You know, and with all that said, I had absolutely no expectations going into this. I didn't hate it.
No.
You know, but it was predictable, but it was also watchable. Switch your brain off, which again means go to sleep. You know, that's what this film is for. It's not offensive or crude, and then it's also incredibly forgettable. So yeah, I recommend Here Comes the Boom as much as I recommend eating warm applesauce. Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
Ready or not, how you like me now?